No, I just watched. Unfortunately, they stole my thunder because I literally diagnosed her with BPD right before the psychologist came.
They validated you. They stole your thunder, but they validated your diagnosis.
I was going to make a video that said I can't diagnose her with BPD because that's not something that you can ever do from a distance, and I'm not a licensed whatever. But she shows these symptoms, and these are symptoms that you can look for that are strong signs. And
5 signs of BPD.
Then a woman who spent 12 plus hours with her, gave her multiple diagnostic tests, talked to people in her life, is a forensic psychologist with oodles and oodles, and she'll be cross-examination that hasn't happened yet. I want to see it. But comes on, and for those of you who don't know, diagnoses her with borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. Broadly speaking, in the DSM, which we can all talk about later, because I think it's interesting how she literally describes the DSM as a Bible, which I go, that's such a problem.
Yeah.
To think that this book is a Bible. I actually think there's huge fundamental meta flaws in the way that we think about these types of personality disorders. But holding that aside for a second, BPD is a type of personality that is very unstable, terror of abandonment, which leads to wild fluctuations in moods. And she basically goes and describes all the things that Johnny Depp alleges, which is violence, fear of abandonment, then very close to you, manipulative behavior, which leads into the histrionic personality, which is all about being the center of attention, doing it, whatever is required to do it, sort of hints at why someone would make this stuff up in the first place, because it's like, why lie?
Yeah.
Well, if you're the type of person who values attention as the highest currency, then that begins to make more sense. And so it was just very interesting. She came in after 10 minutes of credentials, which I was like, okay, we get it. Said that she sat down, tested her for all these things, and that in these, a couple interesting things, in these exams, which I want to take, the MMPI and a number of other ones, it's a series of like true-false questions where you describe yourself. Now, of course you can lie.
Right, yeah.
But the test is designed, and I want to dig into this, so that it's supposed to be able to catch lies, so that things that people think you're supposed to say, it has like, if you answer a bunch of questions true, it's like, this is the type of person who would be lying about having XYZ disorder, saying what they think they're supposed to say based on popular media.
Yeah, because that's always been our critique of personality tests. This just tells you what you think about yourself.
Yes.
But this is designed with that in mind.
Yes. And interestingly, she says the easiest one to fake is PTSD, because PTSD has the most depictions in popular media, so people are ready to like, they know that they're supposed to be afraid of things, they've seen war movies, and so it's easier for them, to understand what would be expected and required of them if they had PTSD versus borderline or histrionic. They might have some idea, but not know people with that diagnosis and not know ways in which they're tipping their hand.
Until this case in your video, at which point the test will be ruined.
And until which we will tip everything. But I want to take this test, not just to see what I score, but
to see the test.
To understand how they do it. Because the other thing is that it definitely occurs to me as I'm watching this that a lot of the symptoms of BPD are like, you'll say something that's not offensive and this person will fly off the chain. So there's a strong sense of like, we're normal and we decide what's offensive. And if you don't fit into that normalness, you've got the disorder.
Right, but there's a huge fight going on right now culturally on what is offensive.
Exactly. Yeah. And this terrifies me to have this Bible be like, hey, we all agree on this thing. And this is, I think this is what mental health is.
I think people like Jordan Peterson would argue that certain people that he's gone and had conversations with were histrionic in the moment, and he even talks, what does he say? He says they're fighting an idea of me and not me. Right? So like, I think that if he gets to decide what's warrants offense, he's going to diagnose a lot of people. Yeah. And then if somebody who's has a philosophy that differs from Jordan Peterson, they're going to say, no, you're just being offensive.
Yes.
So these are completely reasonable responses.
Exactly. And this is, I think, the fundamental problem is it's just, they write the Bible and decide what is normal and then classify everything outside of that as not. Well, now, I happen to fit in the normal thing, so this works for me, because if I was to encounter someone with BPD, I would think they were very sensitive and crazy.
Well, some people are saying that it's harder to diagnose narcissism now because with social media, like the old definition doesn't work. The average has moved in terms of, is obsessed with image and projecting this. And it's just like, I mean, if you're sharing stories of your lunch, that used to be considered crazy.
Yes.
And now it's normal. And so the behavior, like the narcissism hasn't changed, but the behaviors that indicate it they're not the same as they were 20 years ago because of what's considered normal today would have been considered narcissistic 20 years ago.
Well, it's interesting. You said narcissism hasn't changed. What do you mean by that?
There are people who, compared to the average person, will have stronger narcissistic traits. Mm-hmm. But the average has shifted. So in order for you to be abnormally narcissistic today, you have to have a different set of traits than 20 years ago because the baseline normal narcissism has shifted, basically.
Yes. And I see this in action and the big thing is like, I'm okay with these diagnoses. I'm okay with these as useful tools, but please don't trick yourself that this is the Bible. And when the DSM gets whipped out, and there was one moment where she's describing the DSM and she says, according to the DSM, which is like the Bible, trauma can occur in these ways. You can have a really violent thing. And recently in the new DSM, if someone close to you has something bad happen to them that passed the threshold, that can qualify as trauma. It's like, okay, so now we've let you decide what qualifies as trauma, which seems to completely miss the boat, in my opinion, which is trauma is totally about the interpretation of an event.
Yeah.
Has nothing to, I mean, while it is, more likely to occur in a war zone scenario, like it's totally about how the person receives it.
Well, yeah, certainly there are, I'm not a therapist or a psychiatrist or anything like that, but there are people who will say that it's the shame of the event is a big part of the trauma. And that's why in cultures where it was totally normal for people who are well below 18 to be quote unquote groomed in like ancient Greece or Rome by someone of the same sex, there wasn't psychological damage being done because it was culturally accepted. Now you could argue that that's not true and everyone was just being traumatized. This isn't gospel. It's just a argument that some people posit, basically.
And yeah, and I don't know in which DSM, but sexual abuse is now included in things that can create trauma. And there's, I'm sure, a time when it wasn't. There was a time when PTSD didn't exist, and we didn't recognize trauma at all. So to call this so obviously human evolving understanding of what occurs within people.
Well, maybe what she meant was it's a series of allegories put together by a man that has no divine
and
touch.
Should it be taken literally?
Yeah, maybe that's what she meant. Maybe she's an atheist. So this is the Bible. It's a good reference. Like, humans wrote it. It's got some mistakes. It's going to be outdated.
You don't like
the slavery stuff. Don't touch it.
Yeah,
maybe she's a hardcore atheist.
Yes, maybe that is what she meant. Yeah. Fair point. No, but I was struck by that as I was listening to it. And I another thing that I thought, and I can talk to the specifics of Amber Heard, which are interesting, but just at meta level, it seems to me that the things that are described as MPD, the things that are described as BPD or histrionic personality disorder, very much all occur on a spectrum. Mm-hmm. We all have these elements, this fear of abandonment that makes us react in oversensitive ways at time. Mm-hmm. And it seems, and I think that while she would acknowledge this, it seems for the lay person a little bit too safe to think that person has BPD, that person has NPD, and then there's me who just posts a normal amount on Instagram for attention and only gets mildly upset when my partner says I can't do this right now and leaves. You know what I mean? Like it's I think it's just much more useful, and also I want to try not to do this if I have in past videos. I regret it. Just having this other section of humans, the narcissists, and I understand that the pressures that are on me is I'm trying to come up with a title that connects with the understanding that people have, and I've got 8 to 10 minutes to talk about this thing.
No, that was something I realized with the sociopath video that I think I did say. Was this is a spectrum. Mm-hmm. Like you read it and you just go, everybody has some of this. Mm-hmm. And so I think when you have more antisocial traits than others, after a tipping point, you get diagnosed. Mm-hmm. But it's not that all sociopaths have all antisocial personality disorder traits. Mm-hmm. And if you are not a sociopath, you have none. Yeah. That's just absolutely not how it works. You read through them, you say everyone is going to have something that checks a box here. So the diagnosis is basically just saying you have a lot of these. Mm-hmm.
And it's also kind of like, these are going to be rich people diseases, because rich people will only be the ones that ever have the mental health professionals to diagnose them. And so, there's just a lot of...
Well, yeah, I'll kind of try to paraphrase what you're saying, which is not that rich people get it, but that you won't know, which is my hypothesis on why autism and Asperger's is on the rise. Some people say it's because of diet. I think it's because you didn't diagnose people before. Mm-hmm. And so we're just more aware. And in the past, you just said, oh, that person's just not neurotypical, except you said it probably more with a slur or something mean. But I don't think it's that, oh, we're eating worse and autism's up. It's just, we didn't know what this was. Certainly Asperger's. I remember growing up, you never.
They just went, that person's strange. You know what
exactly.
I mean? Like,
It's kind of like is COVID rising or a COVID tests rising thing occurring in the mental health world as well.
Yeah. And another thought that I had while I was doing it is we've got, there's bipolar, there's also histrionic, which is very close to bipolar, and then closely and in the same cluster as narcissist. And then you've got the antisocials. It's like, this kind of seems like trying, I don't have the perfect analogy, but it's trying to describe a tree by like the different shaped leaves that it has. And it's like, there's a commonality to all of these. And I think this is hypothesis more than fact, but it's childhood experiences of what normal relationships require and are in adaptations. And like a much more useful way, rather than talking about the fruits of this, is just to be like, what did this person experience when they were small, and what sense did they make of it?
Well, sometimes you're born with it.
Sure, and sometimes you're born with it.
Like with some psychopaths are genetic.
Yes, I'm talking about more personality disorders.
Yeah.
It seems like a much more useful...
Well, that's antisocial personality disorder. Is
sociopath.
And psychopath.
Oh, it is?
Yes. So it's confusing. They both got bucketed as antisocial personality disorder now, but psychopaths are thought to be genetic.
These categorizations change every 10 years.
Yeah. And at some point, they might even be considered offensive terms. Like it might be, to call someone a psychopath may be considered...
that's a guarantee.
Rude.
That is a guarantee.
Because I see when I was making the video, I see the literature is pushing more towards, you should say the antisocial part. They're not yet at the point where it's bad to say psychopath or sociopath, but you kind of see that is where it's going. But yeah, the thought is only one of them is caused by trauma. The other one is just genetic.
Yeah, it's funny. We start with these clinical words. Of course, lay people pick them up and use them to describe people that don't fall under that definition. So it becomes a mean thing to say to someone.
Yeah.
Then now it's a slur to call someone. So we get a new word, and the process starts anew.
Yeah.
Without recognizing the core of this is that people will insult one another with whatever they have available to them.